All right. So like I said, baked ziti today with a basic marinara sauce, some roasted veggies, and garlic bread on the side. Um, if you aren't going to make the garlic bread, that's perfectly understandable and okay. It's not really a recipe though per se, so I'll just walk everyone through that towards the end. This baked ziti, I mean, it's got the name ziti. You can use ziti pasta if you found that. Fantastic. Like whole wheat penne would be a great alternative option. I happen to have some rotini, which is the like spirally curly Q pasta. Doesn't really matter what shape it's in. So whatever you found, especially if it's in the whole wheat variety, that is A plus. So you want to have your pasta cooked off. If you haven't cooked off your pasta, you want to have that done. That's one of the important lessons about reading a recipe. If we haven't gone over this before, if it says on the side, like in the list of ingredients, pasta cooked according to the package instructions, then that's assuming you already have it cooked off. So your pasta should be cooked and kind of ready to go. If not, then try to get that going now. Get some water boiling and cook your pasta according to whatever kind of pasta it is and whatever the box or the bag says. And usually it's between 9 and 11 minutes for a good al dente. And you want it to be kind of al dente here. You don't want to cook the pasta all the way through on the pot because we're going to be baking it. And so then it would be really, really mushy in the end. It would be overcooked. Hey, Charlie. So we need to do a few things. We're going to be, you need to make your pasta, so you can do that separately if you haven't done it already. I've got mine cooked off and cooling in a colander. So what you can do when you get it cooked off is run it under some cold water and just set it aside until we're ready to use it. We're going to be making our marinara sauce, and then we're going to be roasting some veggies, all kind of quick happening at the same time. It's all really fast and simple. The veggies are going to take the longest in terms of getting them prepped out and into the oven and then cooking for maybe 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. So your oven should be set to 425. It's going to be a pretty high heat, fast roast. And so what we're going to do first is chop our veggies and get that into the oven, and then we're going to make our sauce. The marinara only takes about 5 to 7 minutes. So once the veggies are working, the sauce is going to happen. And then it's all going to come together in the end in a baking dish. So we're using a 9 by 13 baking dish, which is one of those sort of classic casserole sized dishes. But if you have anything else that would work, like any kind of roasting pan or a circular little shallow dish, or sometimes they call them roasters. You could even use like a square brownie pan. It really doesn't make that much of a difference as long as it's big enough to hold the amount of food that you're putting inside of it and that it's oven safe. You need to make sure that it can go into the oven because we're going to be baking this for about 25 minutes at the end to get it all nice and hot and bubbly and get the cheese melty and delicious. So we've got some things to get going. We're going to start right away with cutting these veggies and getting them roasted. So I've got one sheet pan lined with foil. I'm ready to go into my 425, and I am working with, I've got an orange bell pepper. I think that, yeah, the recipe doesn't say what color. It doesn't matter. Better variety. This was the one that the store had on sale for me this week, so I got orange. I've got one good medium-sized zucchini. I've got some button mushrooms, which I've already cleaned by using a wet paper towel and wiping them down. When you're cooking with mushrooms, you want to try to avoid soaking them in water. It makes them slimy. In the end, they absorb a lot of that water, and it takes them a really long time to dry back out. So if you want to have nice, crisp mushrooms to go into your food, especially if you're eating them raw in a salad, use a wet paper towel to wipe down the mushrooms, and that's how you get them nice and clean. So I've got my clean mushrooms here. We're just going to quarter those into kind of a small wedge. We want to get some dices going on our other veggies, and then I'm using some white onion, which we're going to just really small dice to get that nice and chopped up so it spreads out all that good flavor throughout the pasta. So I'm going to start with the onion. I've got it cut so that the core is still attached. That like root end piece, we want to make sure that's still there because that holds the whole onion together. I'm going to cut the other end off, that little stem piece, just because it's kind of raggedy. And then I'm following the lines of my onion. I'm going to follow all those curved little lines around the side, cutting it into slices. Try not to cut it all the way through like I just did. Try to cut it so that you're leaving the little root end attached. So it holds it together like a whole piece of onion like that, still attached at the base. And then we go across our cuts and slice into tiny little dices. Make sure your fingertips are safe and out of the way if you're using knives. Chop that up nice and small. We want it to be pretty small so that you're not biting into any big pieces of onion once it's cooked up. Right? So once you're done, all you have left is that little root bit, and that goes into the compost. And you can use a lot more onion if you like. This calls for a quarter of an onion. It depends on the size of onion that you started with. I started with a pretty small onion, so I'm actually going to use half. If you have a medium to big normal sized onion, then just a quarter is plenty. Mine was very small. So I'm going to add a little bit more, plus I like a lot of onion flavor, and it's good for me, right?
That's right. Onions are very good for you. I have my notes here. Yeah, we could talk about, you want to talk about onions?
Yeah, maybe any of these veggies. That would be good while I'm just kind of chopping away.
Okay, great. Yeah, so onions are high in vitamin C, B vitamins, and potassium. Research shows that eating onions can actually reduce inflammation, decrease triglycerides, and reduce high blood pressure and cholesterol levels. So all of those factors, would help prevent heart disease and stroke. So really, they're good for heart health, essentially. And also eating vegetables like garlic and onion have been linked to lower risks of certain cancers, including stomach cancer and colorectal. So that's also awesome. And then onions also possess anti-diabetic effects, which is great for insulin uptake if you have any diabetes. And they also are a great source of prebiotics. So probiotics are talked about a lot, but prebiotics is basically the food for the probiotics. So that can certainly help with your gut health. So that way you absorb all the amazing nutrients from all the ingredients that you're using today. Lots of benefits for onions.
Seriously, wow. I knew some of that first part that you talked about because we talked a little bit about it, but I don't think that it ever sunk into me how prebiotics that's so important. That's so cool.
Yeah, prebiotics are basically the food for the probiotics to do their job. So a lot of times that gets kind of looked over because they go hand in hand together. I guess the only negative thing about onions would be your breath. Other than that, for terms of health, you're good to go.
Yeah, that's why we have toothpaste and mints, right?
And mint, exactly, right? You can always have a little mint with this meal if you need to.
Yeah. Yeah. We do have fresh basil going into this at the end, so that's another thing. You can kind of just chew on some fresh basil. That would definitely help.
There you go. Yeah, for sure. That's great. And we've talked a lot about zucchini. We've been using zucchini a lot and bell pepper actually a lot in most of our recipes that we've been making.
Yeah.
But again, both of those are really great for immune boosting nutrients and, sources of vitamins A, vitamin C, fiber, iron, all of which help boost immunity. Mushrooms we've also talked about before, but they have antioxidants, B vitamins, fiber, and potassium. And we did mention last time, but in case you're new and joining us, because I do see a few new people, if you do put mushrooms in the sun for about 10 to 30 minutes, you can actually get some vitamin D out of it. And there's very few food sources of vitamin D. So anytime you can kind of sneak, and especially, non-animal sources as well. So if you can sneak in some vitamin D by throwing those mushrooms outside real quick or on your windowsill or somewhere where they can get sun, you can get some extra vitamin D too. So yeah, and I love, again, Julia's so good with using different colored vegetables. It's very important for getting different nutrients. So she's using, not only does it make the food look more appealing, but from a nutrition standpoint, it's extremely important. So every recipe she does, awesome job of getting a variety, as you can see on her cutting board right there.
It's not pretty, right? See, I feel like the prettier the natural ingredients are, the more nutritious the dish is going to be, the more it kind of looks like the wonders of nature and all the beauty that it provides. Like, that's going to be really good for me, I bet.
Perfect. So yeah, that kind of covers a lot of those
awesome
ingredients that you're using. So back to you.
Super healthy stuff here, guys. And you're not really gonna know it because it's going into a dish that's really comforting and really classic, really good, flavorful tomato sauce. A little bit of cheese, although if you read through the recipe, you notice we're switching up some of that with some good healthy cottage cheese, which is really makes this even more of a fun alternative option. So I've got my veggies all chopped up. This is it. We've got our bell pepper, mushroom, zucchini, and onion. I'm going to be tossing this with extra virgin olive oil, salt and pepper, and some dried Italian seasoning. You can get these pre-mixed in a bag or a bottle. It's a really good blend. It's a good pantry staple if you don't have that in your cupboard already, just because it is a pre-mixed, ready-to-go mix of some of the classic herbs that you find in Italian cooking, like oregano, parsley, thyme. There's some marjoram in here. It's a really nice blend, and it goes with, even if you're not aiming for Italian, it goes with veggies really, really well. So we're going to use that, our olive oil, and salt and pepper once it's all mixed together. So to save myself from doing extra dishes, you've all heard me talk about that before, I'm just going to make a nice pile of the veggies right in the middle of my sheet pan, which is lined with foil already. These are just going to all go together right in the middle. And then I'm going to drizzle the olive oil over the top, and I'm going to just toss them together right on the sheet pan. Saves me a bowl, saves me some trouble later on. And this way you can get it really nice and coated. So that is just about 2 tablespoons. You could probably get away with about 1 tablespoon of oil and then toss it together and see if you need a little bit more. You just want it to be coated so that they don't get dried or burnt in the oven while they roast, but they don't need to be swimming. You don't want to have a pool of olive oil on your pan. I'll move it here so you can see. I'm just tossing it with my hands, nice and coated, kind of rubbing the oil into the veggies as needed. And then once I'm convinced that it's nice and evenly drenched a little bit, I'm going to then just spread it out. Nice even layer. Then I'm going to sprinkle over my seasonings and my salt and pepper. So for the seasonings, it's about a teaspoon of the dried Italian herbs. So I'm going to just use my fingers and pinch out what looks to me like a teaspoon. When you're using dried herbs, this is super important, guys, to kind of pinch them, like rub them between your fingers while you sprinkle it over your food. What you're doing is breaking it up into smaller, easier to process pieces, and you're kind of wakening the herbs back up. You're crushing them, which makes the aroma and the flavor start to come out, which is nice to help it get going once you're in the oven. So we've got our Italian seasoning, just 1 little pinch of salt and pepper. I'm not going, this is about 1/4 teaspoon, little pinch to sprinkle all over all of it. And then about the same, I like a lot of pepper in my pastas, so I'm going with about 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. But it's to taste on salt and pepper. We're going to be adding a little bit more salt in later, plus there's a little bit of salt in our cheese later on, so you don't need a lot. All right, that's going right into the oven, right in the middle rack, 425. I'm going to set my timer for about 10 minutes. I'll check them, see how they're doing. I'm going to wash my hands here. Okay. We want to get our sauce going, and then both of these things will be done right around the exact same time, which is great. For the sauce, the only prep that we really have to do is mincing up some garlic. I've got 2 cloves here. If you have one of those like jars of garlic pre-minced ready to go, that's awesome. You can definitely use that. I have one of those squeezy tubes of garlic that I am going to be using later on for the garlic bread. Garlic is good for you either way, so don't worry about what form you're using it in. It's perfectly fine. I'm going to chop off the little end pieces where the stem was, just to kind of get that woody bit away, and then I'm going to crush these using the flat part of my knife. That helps get that peel off real easy. And then I'm going to mince these very, very, very finely. You can use a garlic press if you have that. Just make sure that you get all of it out of the garlic press. You want to make sure you're getting all 2 full cloves of garlic into your sauce. If you like garlic, then put in 3 or 4. If you don't like garlic, you can leave the garlic out. It is definitely a traditional flavor in a marinara sauce, but it's your world when you're the one cooking, so you can absolutely leave it out if you want to, although 2 little cloves with the amount of other flavors we're putting in is not going to be too spicy or overwhelming. It's pretty much just right. So I've got this finely minced. You want to get it as small and chopped up as possible so that it spreads out really well in our sauce. What we're going to be doing is heating this in our pan. We want to get our pan hot first. Get a little oil in there, and then we're going to be putting in our garlic and then our tomatoes and all of our good sauce stuff. So turn your sauce pot on to about a medium heat. This one might be a little big. You're making just about as much sauce. It's going to end up being about a cup's worth. No. Yeah. 2 cups of sauce. So depending on the size of your pot, it's fine. So get your pot heating up over medium heat. We're going to add in about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. 2. Going to let that get warm. It doesn't have to be smoking hot, but we don't want to put the garlic in yet. While the oil is cold, it will kind of garlic a little bit too much. We don't want to do that. So you let this get just a little bit warm first, and then we're going to add in our garlic and saute that just for a couple of minutes. We don't have this on a very high heat because we don't want our garlic to burn, but we do want it to start to become very aromatic and really broken down a little bit. So it's starting to soften up before we put our tomatoes in. I'm going to be using a wooden spoon for this. I tend to just like using wood when I'm using tomato product because the acid in tomatoes and tomato sauce can sometimes react if you're using a metal utensil, depending on the utensil, if it's just aluminum or things like that. You can have kind of a flavor reaction happen if you use that too much with a tomato sauce. So I tend to recommend using a wooden or a silicone tool if you are making a tomato product like this sauce. All right. I think for now I'm going to turn the camera around. You guys are good on the cutting board for a minute. Check out our cooking situation here. I might need to, get another box. Hold on. Okay. Good. So you want to saute it up until you can really smell it, and it's starting to sizzle around the edges and the sides. But if your garlic is starting to brown or get golden in color at all, then your heat needs to be turned down. So you can adjust it to about a medium low instead of a medium if necessary. If it's starting to look like the garlic is getting crispy, we don't want crispy pieces of garlic. We just want kind of sweated. We call this, we're sweating the garlic out so that it just becomes tender and translucent. So liquids start to kind of cook out of it, but it's not crisping up. Okay, you can sweat onions, you can sweat vegetables, and so it's like sauteing it on a low, slow heat. So we're sweating out the garlic just to become nice and fragrant. Start to cook that process so it's really nice and bright and garlicky in here now. And I can tell some of the super smallest bits are getting a little bit golden, just a touch. So I'm turning my heat down. I'm going to add in the tomato product now. It should have been one of the larger cans, a 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes. If you could have found that, tomato sauce would be okay. I'm using a combination of crushed and diced tomatoes because that's what I found, one I already had. So very forgiving sauce and recipe. You can use kind of a couple of different kinds of tomato product for this. So I'm going to add in the tomatoes, a little touch of salt and pepper, again, just a teeny pinch of the salt, and then nice. Very nice and warm and sizzly in there, even though it's on the lowest possible heat. So that's great. I want to make sure I get everything out of the can. And if you want to use red pepper flakes, you would add it now also. So a little bit of salt and pepper and then a little bit of red pepper flakes. And that's if you want just a slight bit of spiciness in your pasta sauce. Then fresh red pepper flakes is the traditional way we would get that into a marinara. So this is going to cook on kind of a medium-low heat until it comes back up to a simmer. You want to be really careful when you're cooking tomato sauces though, guys, because if it's on too high of a heat, it's going to start to splatter and spit, and you're going to have tomato sauce seriously all over on the ceiling. It's going to be everywhere. So keep an eye on the tomato sauce. Make sure it's not spitting all over your kitchen. Keep it between about a medium, low, and medium. Don't go too high. Once it comes back up to a simmer and starts to boil, it's not going to need very much longer. We're just going to turn it down low and let it kind of cook out some of the water so that it becomes more of a condensed tomato-y sauce. So like I said, I'm just going to be putting in a very small pinch. This is probably about 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. We are going to be putting in sugar. Sugar is the key secret ingredient in all of like the little old lady Italian sauces. You traditionally, every Italian I've heard of, yeah, my mom put just a little bit of sugar. That's the secret. I was like, I don't think it's much of a secret anymore, but it does go a really long way to bringing out the flavors of the tomatoes and the herbs and the other things that we're going to be putting into this dish. So it is a teaspoon of sugar for this amount of sauce, which I'm not sure, Melody, when you get a tomato sauce on the shelf, the amount of added sugar sometimes in those jars can be pretty bad, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of hidden sugar and sodium in there. So when you make something yourself, it's always better because you can control how much is putting in. So you'll see how little, sugar there is in a jar. I actually have one in my refrigerator, so I can take a look and see how much added sugar is in that one.
Awesome.
But obviously it's usually more than, what you do on your own. But I can take a look. Actually, I have one here, so I can.
That would be cool. Yeah,
yeah.
Let's do a little experiment and see. I am putting in crushed red pepper to mine because I like things definitely spicy. So I recommend about 1/4 teaspoon of crushed red pepper if you like things with a little bit of a kick. If you like things with a lot of bit of a kick, then go ahead and add in 1/2 teaspoon. But 1/4 teaspoon is going to give it that nice kind of earthy, smoky, spicy flavor that a lot of classic tomato sauces have. So that's it. That's your basic, simple, stovetop 5-minute marinara sauce. You can definitely make a traditional marinara that sits on the stove for about 4 hours and really, really get some deep, hearty flavor, and that's great. For this weeknight option, we want to learn how to make something that's sort of the fast version of it so we can get this in the oven as quickly as we can. This sauce, though, if you wanted to, you and your parents, you guys could make a big batch of it and then keep it in the freezer in containers, and it lasts months. You could definitely freeze it for like 4 months at least, and then take out portions of it if you freeze it in small containers, things like that. Highly recommend doing large quantities because you can use this for regular spaghetti. You can make meatballs and then cook it in your marinara sauce. You could use it for sandwiches. You can use it as a dip with your veggie sticks. You can do a lot of different things with a good classic marinara sauce. So always a good idea to make extra if you like that in your house and you eat a lot of it because it does freeze very well. All right, so that's going to cook just for maybe a couple minutes. I've got it on medium heat just so it kind of gets a little hot and bubbly. Timer is just about to go off. I want to turn the veggies just a little bit so you can see at a very high heat how the mushrooms are already cooking way down. They've gotten extremely small because the water that's inside of them evaporates away and they shrink up. And I'm getting a lot of water coming out of the onions and zucchini, which means that they are getting nice and soft and tender. So I think I'm just going to turn this in the oven 180 degrees so that it gets a good even cook. And I'm only going to cook it for another maybe 3 minutes. So let me spin this around so that my front becomes my back and everything gets nice and toasty. Set my timer for just about 3 minutes. which I think will be the perfect amount of time for this sauce to finish. See, I'm getting a little bit of simmer. The bubbles are starting to come. That's exactly where I want this to live. I don't want it to get too rip boiling, and I don't want those bubbles to go away. I want it to stay simmering so that the water inside will evaporate and it will become a nice thick goopy sauce, which we want for our baked dish. Okay, so the last part of this recipe is like assembly and baking. So let's go over that really quick. We're going to be mixing our cooked pasta with some of the sauce, some of the cheese, and some of the veggies, I think. No, basil. That's what we need to do. We need to cut our basil. And then we're going to be spreading things out in layers so that it gets nice and like, oh, it's just going to all incorporate together and be really oozy and gooey and delicious. So we're going to get our basil chopped up. And then everything else is going to be basically about mixing and assemblies because we want to get this in the oven basically in the next 5-6 minutes so that it can bake really quickly. So my basil, show you here. I've got my basil already picked off the basil plant and wrapped up in a wet paper towel to keep it from drying out completely. It's not necessarily the freshest, brightest green basil. I got it a couple days ago, but that is okay. The flavor is on point. If some of your basil is a little too black, you don't want to necessarily chop that into your sauce because it's just going to look like black specks. Although it's still going to taste really good. So in the long run, it doesn't make that big of a difference. So I've rolled up all of my leaves of basil into a little bundle here. And then I'm going to cut straight across. This is called a chiffonade. Chiffonade, French for ribbons. We're making little teeny tiny skinny ribbons. Or chiffonade these little basil leaves. And then once you have your strips, which are really nice and pretty as a garnish, you can just rough chop these up because we want this chopped up pretty finely to go into our pasta. Okay, so I'm going to have some fresh chopped basil to mix into the pasta, which is going to get mixed in with a little bit of the sauce, so on and so on. So that is done. That is simple. Get a little cleanup going on here. Okay, sauce is done. Veggies are done. You want to leave your oven at 425 for the baking. All right. We are going to mix our cooked pasta with about 2 cups of this marinara, maybe even a cup. I'm just going to look at what it looks like mixed together. Need a big bowl. My cooked pasta here. Drop one. 2 cups of the marinara. I have a metal measuring cup.
I'm happy to report that my last jar here, pasta sauce, has 0 grams of added sugar. So, hey.
That's brand. That's good to know.
That is good to know. This is a Trader Joe's brand, but in general, I know Prego does, and maybe Barilla possibly their sauce, but yeah, definitely take a look at that or make it yourself, as Julia is doing. So, but yeah, that's good. Woo! I passed.
That's really good. Yeah, that's always good to know. So I actually only used about 1.25 cups of the sauce, and we still have sauce here, which is good because we need to layer that in. I'm going to be adding in that chopped basil that we chopped up, about 1/4 cup of chopped basil. And then we're going to be adding into this just 1/2 cup of the mozzarella. Thank you. If you have shredded mozzarella, that would be the best for this. If you're using like a fresh mozzarella, then you would cut it into small little pieces. So it's just, what did I say? 1/2 cup of mozzarella. See, I have one right here. Perfect. So this is sort of our pasta mixture. Everything else is going to be layered in separately. I'm just going to toss this up. That is a hot sauce. I am not using my hands. There we go. Okay, so you want to put a little bit of that marinara sauce at the bottom of your baking dish to create the very first layer. It doesn't have to be a ton. You just want to kind of get some in there and then spread it around so the bottom is all covered. I'll show you here. Let me get everything over to our assembly station. That's the best thing when you're doing anything kind of factory style. Set up your own assembly station so that everything that you need is where you need it and accessible. And then you won't have to be moving around a ton and making a bunch of other messes and things. Okay, let me adjust. Good. So I'm going to just use my measuring cup here that I've been using and put a little bit, about a quarter of a cup, at the bottom of this pan and spread it around so that it's covered, so that it's not going to burn when I put the pasta in at the bottom.
All right. So while
Okay, just enough to cover. And then, yeah, let's not mess around with the sound too much. So we are going to put in half of the pasta mixture. Try to spread it out in an even layer, leaving about half for the next layer. Doesn't have to be exact, just kind of pour out what looks like half. Spread it around, make sure it's kind of even. We're going to be putting our veggies sprinkled over this. You can use a spatula or good tongs or a spoon. Be careful because they're still hot out of the oven. Splitting the amount in half, so just about generally half the amount of veggies this time, and then the other half we're going to be putting in next time. Sprinkle all over, try to make it nice and even. Get a good disbursement of veggies throughout. Okay, and then we're going to be using some of our cheese. We need to be putting in about a cup of the cottage cheese and some mozzarella. I got a good low-fat part skim mozzarella and a non-fat cottage cheese, which works perfectly well. You could do a low-fat and it would be good, but why not? You know, use one of the better ones. So this is a half a cup. I'm just going to literally use my hands to kind of dollop it around. It does not have to be like spread evenly across it, like a layer of ricotta or something. This is just dolloping it and kind of plopping it wherever it lands. Trying to spread it out so that like it's not all on one half of the dish, but just move it around. Okay. And then we're going to put in our mozzarella. It's just going to be, what did I say, about a half a cup? Yeah. This you do kind of want to spread out evenly. You want to make sure that it goes throughout the pasta, and when it melts in there, it helps bind it all together. I'm not even going to use a whole half a cup in that layer. Probably that was a little bit less, maybe a quarter of a cup. And then we're going to do the same thing. Rest of the pasta, then more veggies, then more cottage cheese, and then more mozzarella. We're going to put the last of the marinara on top of everything, and then the last of the mozzarella. If you have Parmesan and like that, you can absolutely add that on top. That would give it like a nice extra bit of flavor and toastiness. So spread out that last bit of pasta. Try to kind of make it even. Spread it out so it's basically another second layer. We're almost building lasagna here, except that's what Big Ziti is. It turned into sort of a weeknight version of lasagna for families that love lasagna but don't want to go through that entire process during the week. This is your alternative. So I'm going to do the rest of the veggies. Just going to use my foil here to help pick it up and carry it over. Spread it around. sure that it's nice and well distributed. Okay, and then the same thing with our cottage cheese and our mozzarella. Pretty sure that in total our cottage cheese was 2 cups. So you could do 1 cup in each layer, right? Which is basically that whole container of cottage cheese. I'm going to use my fingers just to kind of dollop this around, spread it out. This is really fun, playing with your food. And then the mozzarella. Just a little bit at this point because we're going to be putting more on the top. The rest of the marinara I'm going to pour on, well, yeah, I kind of want all that sauce to drip down throughout. So I'm just going to pour it over, spreading it out. I am going to use my wooden spoon that I had, spatula here, to kind of spread out that sauce just a little bit more evenly so that everything gets kind of the drip down effect of the sauce while it bakes. And then mozzarella on top and straight into the oven. This wants to bake for at least 20 minutes. Everything that's in it is already cooked. It's cooked pasta, it's cooked vegetables. The cheese just needs to get hot and melty, and what we want to happen is the cottage cheese to cook into all the sauce and the other stuff going on, and then that's it. Doesn't take very long. Once you've got a good solid single layer of mozzarella on top, that is that. I'm going to put this in the oven. You want to cook it on a sheet pan if you can. This cookie sheet that I use for the veggies, now that the foil is gone, is going to be perfect for this because, well, if yours comes up to the very top of your pan, you want to be careful about any dripping, but also it's going to make it a lot easier for you to get this heavy, delicious baked pasta out of the oven when it's done. So you want to keep it on a sheet pan for just ease of use, and then this is one of the rare times we're not going to the middle rack of the oven. You want to go to the bottom rack, closer to the bottom of the pan. The oven. It's going to help it get really gooey and caramelized and cooked from the bottom up through the middle. And then for the last 5 minutes or so, we're going to put it on the very top rack so that it's close to the metal plate on the top of the oven, which is going to give us that nice sort of golden brown melty cheese concept. So I'm going to set my timer. Well, should be done right when class is over, which is going to be great. I'm going to set it for 10 so that I can look at it, check the temperature, make sure that it's not getting too browned on the bottom, because then I can always lift it up to a top rack a little bit earlier if necessary. It definitely depends on everybody's oven. And that is the fun part about this one. You can kind of, at this point, just start cleaning up and get everything squared away for when you're ready to sit down to eat, because you're not going to want to come back and do dishes later. Trust me. If there are any other questions, though, about that recipe, you can fire them off now. I'm going to get the garlic bread going. That only takes about, 6 minutes for it to toast. It depends on the bread that you're using, totally. And my bread is one of those bake at home, take and bake kind of breads, so it's actually only partially baked. If you have bread that is already completely baked through, then your garlic bread is going to take even less time in the oven. This, let's see, is one of the organic breads from Pavilions. It is 7 to 9 minutes until done. I'm only going to use one. Everybody makes garlic bread a little bit differently, and that's great. You should really find the way that sounds the best to you. This is how I make my garlic bread. Here it is, my bread knife. I want to cut this horizontally in half so that I have 2 flat sides. And then I'm going to spread both sides with a mixture of olive oil and a little bit of butter. And then my garlic paste and a little tiny bit of grated Parmesan. That's just how I like it. Everybody really has their own kind of way of doing garlic bread. So I've got my 2 flat open pieces here. I am going to, yes, here it is. I have a little bowl. I'm just going to mix some extra virgin olive oil right here in this little bowl, and then I'm going to just brush it on using a pastry brush or one of those little silicone brushes. It's only about a tablespoon and a half of olive oil. And then I am going to use, I have soft butter. I always leave my butter out. That I'm going to just be using a half a teaspoon of butter. That goes into the olive oil, and I'm going to mix those two together. Just a little bit of combination of flavors goes a long way making the garlic bread really, really delicious. But most of the flavor is going to come from the garlic. You can use garlic powder if you have that. I just don't recommend using garlic salt. That would be too salty to achieve the level of garlic that you probably want with garlic bread. So, fresh garlic or garlic powder, or like these tubs of squeezy garlic, or if you have the chopped garlic in a jar, then what I would do is use the oil, like the garlicky oil that it comes in, and just brush that all over your bread. That would be delicious. I'm going to use that butter and olive oil mix in my little brush, just coat each piece of bread. Doesn't have to be perfect. Certainly doesn't have to be drenched or swimming. Some garlic bread is really, really greasy all the way down to the bottom of the bread. I don't think that's necessary. Just brushing that on my two half loaves here. And then, so I've got, like I said, this garlic in a squeezy paste. There's all different kinds of prepared garlic. If you're using fresh garlic, then you just chop a whole clove in half and rub it on the bread. Honestly, it sounds crazy, like how is that going to get any garlic on here? But it does. You can actually just like that cut open side of the garlic, just rub it all over, and it'll get a lot of garlic flavor on your bread. I'm going to use this squeezed paste of garlic. I'm using a half a tablespoon per loaf. I like garlicky garlic bread. You can vary this, but I think this is a pretty standard, I think it's a good ratio for a garlic flavored garlic bread. So half a tablespoon. And that would be the same if you're using chopped fresh garlic or roasted garlic. You could roast garlic and then squeeze it out. That's basically what this tube is. If you're using garlic powder, that's a little stronger in flavor. Sometimes I would recommend start with a teaspoon and kind of sprinkle it over and see if it looks like it's coating the top at least, and then go from there. But yeah, garlic powder is a little bit more condensed of a flavor. I'm going to be using grated Parmesan, classic Americana style. And I'm just sprinkling a little bit over the top of each. I would say that's about a quarter teaspoon of Parmesan on each one. Spread it out. And that's it. I don't add salt because the Parmesan, and I don't add pepper, but if you like black pepper, add black pepper because that would be really, really delicious. So I'm going to put that into the oven on the top rack, since that is free right now above the baking pasta. You can bake garlic bread at about 375 normally. I know our oven is pretty hot right now, but because it's at the top, it shouldn't burn, and I'm going to keep an eye on it. So it's just about 5 minutes, probably instead of the 7 to 9 that the package estimated, because my oven is hot. But I'm going to get a really nice toasty bread, and it's going to just be finished faster, which is okay by me. Putting a few of these things away, clearing up some space. All of this now is about the waiting game, which is hard when you're waiting for something really delicious. But I think, did we cover some of all of the most important ingredients here?
We didn't really talk about the cheese yet.
Oh, please.
But let's do that. The cottage cheese is awesome because it's super high in protein. So 1 cup is about 28 grams of protein, which is more than a 3-ounce piece of meat, believe it or not. So it's packed with protein. However, it is a little bit higher in sodium than other cheeses, so just keep an eye on that. I don't know on your container if it says how many milligrams are in the container we're using, but let's see, I don't know if you still have it there.
Yeah, 350.
Right. So that's a little bit high. So I don't know if it's possible when you're shopping to kind of just compare brands and take a look and see if it's possible to find ones that have a little bit less or not. Just go with the lowest amount you can find, basically. But it is high in calcium, phosphorus, great for your bones, and awesome amount of protein. But yeah, that's the only downside with it. So that's my only advice is just don't be brand specific, just look more for the sodium.
Great tip.
There.
Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah, thanks for sharing the amount and that exact one. What brand was that, just out of curiosity?
That's Daisy, which is a very normal, big American corporate brand. Daisy sour cream and cottage cheese, which is a pretty standard brand, but definitely not one of the brands that you're going to find a lot of low sodium or low sugar, I've noticed, compared to some other big corporate brands which aim to become kind of, they have a healthy version of their own stuff. I've noticed that they don't as much. So there's probably a better version.
Okay, great. No, thanks for sharing that. I know Nudesen is another one that I think is okay in terms of sodium, but definitely take a look. Store-bought brand, whatever you can find.
Great tip.
And then mozzarella cheese, it is a soft cheese. It provides a lot of fat-soluble vitamins, which is awesome because you do need some fat to absorb fat-soluble vitamins. So I know we're using the non-fat, which is great. But you do need a little bit of fat in your diet in general to absorb fat-soluble vitamins. It does provide calcium, and which is essential for bone health. So most dairy products do. And of course, it's great we're using the part skim or lower fat version, so we can reduce the amount of saturated, which is our unhealthy fat. So that's great. That's pretty much it for those two. Really? I think we kind of touched upon everything else, really. So
yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. This is another really good, like, sneaky healthy one. You're getting a lot of really good nutrition. But for me, all I think when I eat it is this makes me feel comforted and like happy and really good. And so it's a good combination of like healthy for your soul and healthy for your body. It's good.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that, oh man, that garlic bread, I can smell it. I hope you're cooking this in your kitchens because it's going to smell like heaven all night long. I love the smell of garlic and butter and cheese and oil. That is looking fantastic, you guys. Yeah, our timer's about to go off, which is our check timer. So we're going to just look at our baked ziti. We want to make sure that we spin it around as usual if necessary. If your pasta looks like it's hot and maybe even a little bubbly, the mozzarella is melted but not browned, but completely melted, then you might be ready to go ahead and raise it up to the top shelf. Like we said, that it's already cooked through. And unlike a lasagna where it really needs to, I don't know, kind of blend and soak in all that stuff, we've done most of the work already by pre-roasting the veggies and making that little mixture of the pasta with some of the sauce already. So it's going to incorporate and become a finished dish pretty quickly. If you wanted to, you could cook it as long as half an hour. I just don't think that that's absolutely necessary. It's going to be really delicious and well blended at about 20 minutes also. So it's kind of like what it looks like right now in your oven. My cheese is almost completely melted. Like I can kind of still see the individual strings of mozzarella. I'm going to show you right now. Get my other towel. Very important when you're doing heavy things in the oven to use both hands. So you want to make sure that both your hands have something to hold on to. You see mine, it's definitely melty, and that cheese is starting to turn into kind of more of an ooze, which is really nice. Everything is coming together. I'm going to spin it around 180 degrees. I'm going to leave it on the bottom just for another about 2 minutes. Check my garlic bread. Spin that around also. In really just about 2 minutes, I'm going to swap them both so that my cheese gets kind of nice and browned up top. My garlic bread will finish toasting on the bottom. All of that's going to take about 5 minutes, so you'll be able to see it all just in time for the end of class, which I love when things work out. What did I have planned for next week? Taco night. I hope that sounds really good. I'm really excited already. So next week, we're going to be looking into making some turkey tacos and but like a whole spread of your classic Americana Tex-Mex taco night, including, I thought we could make a little side of some rice and beans. We'll have to see if I can figure the timing of it all out right, but we'll have to check into that. But I think that a classic Tex-Mex taco night is what we're going to be looking at next week with freshly made stuff. So don't get the little taco shells. Don't go buy those in advance or anything. We're going to be making kind of our own deliciousness here. But I will email, obviously, everything out to everybody by the end of the week. So make sure you look for recipes and reminders for next week. Actually, you'll probably get that by tomorrow. So look out for the regular recipes. And then we'll have another week after that. So if anybody has, thought we could do some baking, maybe that's what we'll do in our last class. We could do a couple different baking options since some of you are not in our baking workshop. But yeah, there's a couple other ideas I'm kind of tossing around for next week. So it might not be tacos. It might be a complete surprise when you get that email tomorrow, but that's what I'm leaning towards right now. Okay, I can really smell the garlic bread. When you can really, really smell your food, that usually tells you that it's either ready or close to being ready. You can see here that I'm getting a very toasted edge on some of my bread, and the Parmesan is actually starting to get to be a golden color. That is what we are looking for a little bit. I'm going to put it in, like I said, for just a couple minutes longer. Meanwhile, I'm lifting my pasta up from the bottom rack to the very top rack so that I can get some golden brown action happening on my cheesiness. Right up top. I think the bread really just needs about a minute and a half longer. That's going to cook in the bottom. I keep a pizza stone in my oven all the time. It is a nice treated, like big ceramic stone, you know, that you can buy to make pizzas directly on, which is really great for crisping up bread and making things taste like and feel like they came out of a wood burning or super high heat stone oven. I think that it left in the oven for all the time, it makes a more consistent heat. It actually keeps the heat in the oven really well because when the stone gets hot, it stays hot and it helps keep the oven at a very good high heat. Even if your oven starts to maybe turn itself off, you know, and then kick back on to adjust the temperature, or you're opening and closing the door a lot, that stone will really help keep a higher consistent heat in your oven while you're doing roasting or any kind of bread baking or any of those kinds of things. So just as a little side note, I leave one in my oven at all times. So that's on the bottom rack, and I've just put the sheet tray of bread onto that stone, which means it's going to be extremely hot directly underneath that bread. So I'm trying to stay very conscious and aware of like what the situation is inside the oven so that I can be in charge of not burning my bread on the bottom of the bread. I do want to check the bottom and make sure that it's getting kind of all toasty throughout. Yeah, the bread is not soggy anymore. It's toasted. It's crunchy around the edges like a good piece of toast would be. So I've got my garlic bread. I'm just going to set that to the side. Super simple. Let's see. Hopefully we get a little bit of a golden brown action happening in here because we've just got a couple minutes. I want to be able to show you this before it is too late. Let me think. I know that we've done guacamole and stuff before, so taco nights. That's why I was kind of thinking these would be not like Southwestern style like we did with our black bean quesadilla, if everybody remembers that. That was very early on, so some of you might not have been in the class yet. These I'm going to be leaning more towards we're going to make a taco blend with our ground turkey and some really good spices, but we're not going to get a packet of taco seasoning because that is mostly salt, I think. So we're going to be making our own nice, good, classic taco blend and cooking all of that delicious stuff with some good, healthy corn tortillas and have a really nice who said taco night has to always be Tuesdays, right? We're going to do it on Wednesdays next week, and it's going to be great. All right. I am getting some browning happening around the sides, but this could be a little bit more golden. It also depends on the kind of mozzarella that you get. A lot of the time, the low-fat or non-fat skim mozzarella doesn't actually melt out quite as well as the full-fat version for obvious reasons. It's not as lubricated or melty, but it's still really soft and good. I'm running out of time, so I don't want to miss out on showing everybody. I will take the picture as usual and post it on our Instagram account so you can see a really nice close-up shot once it is all brown and bubbly. But that's the only thing, is you're going to just leave that in the oven for maybe another 5 minutes, depending on how yours looks. The most important thing and all that really matters is that inside it's really hot and steamy and bubbly and delicious. And I think we can tell that just by pulling a little bit away from one of the sides. Yeah, that water and juice in there is extremely hot. So I know that my noodles and everything is really well blended and kind of like solidified. You could cut this out and serve like a scoop, almost like a lasagna. Be very, very tasty, and we made sure that we spread out all of our flavors, so each layer and each bite is going to be full of delicious, nutritious awesomeness. So that is like literally the whole thing. I can't really plate this because it's a giant casserole dish of pasta. If you were to be plating this individually for your family, which is really, really lovely, then you could top each bowl with a bit more of chopped fresh basil. That would be really delicious. Chopping up your garlic bread into little strips or fingers and serving that on the side of each plate. Maybe a little salad also would really round this meal off quite perfectly, I think. Like I said, I'm going to get this a little bit more golden brown, but I just wanted to make sure that you saw the mostly finished product before class was done here. And that is our delicious vegetarian baked ziti. I hope that everybody had fun. I hope that if you made it, yours is delicious and you're gonna have a wonderful dinner. If there were any questions or comments throughout, no, excellent.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for being here as usual. This was really, really fun. And sign up for all of the rest of our workshops. Make sure you tell your friends next week if they're into taco night. We're gonna have a lot of different like toppings and assortments and ideas, and that's one of the most fun things to learn how to cook, is because if you get a base of a good, well-blended taco mix, then you are the chef. You get to come up with all the different things you want to put on top of it. We're going to be making a fresh salsa. We can make the turkey mix. We're going to be cooking our own tortillas in the pan, so not the like crispy fried Taco Bell style, which is better. So lots of different fun options happening next time.
Right.
Yeah, this was awesome, you guys. I hope that yours comes out. And send us pictures, let us know how it turns out for you. We've been getting a lot of fun emails lately, right, Melody? I mean,
yeah, they're great. Thank you.
Yeah. Always thank you for sharing your cooking with us. We're very proud and pleased to be a part of your journey in the kitchen.
Yes, yeah. I love that. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to turn the recording off. If you have